Welcome to the Job Matchmakers Podcast, where we share stories from employment consultants about supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to find employment in their communities, one person, one job at a time.
This podcast is produced by the Minnesota Transformation Initiative, a technical assistance center focused on expanding capacity for competitive integrated employment across Minnesota. We are your hosts, Sherry Healy and Brian Bajan, and we work at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Job Matchmakers Podcast.
In this episode, we're talking with Brenda Albright, a job coach with LifeWorks, a provider of day employment and in-home supports in the Twin Cities. Brenda is a seasoned veteran in this field. She's been doing this work for about 30 years. We're grateful to have her join us on the podcast today to share her experience and expertise as she tells us one of many stories from her career in employment services.
Welcome, Brenda. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start off by having you tell us, how did you get into this work?
Well, I worked in the residential setting for quite some time. And then as I moved forward, I got into the day program sector. And I was a program manager, overseeing many staff and about 70 clients. And we just kind of helped support them at the different crew sites that we had at that time. The company I was with did some restructuring after I was there about 15 years. And so I moved on to LifeWorks, where I've been for about 18 years, almost 19. And I just loved the day program sector, and that shifted more towards employment. And so now we're looking at, helping people find jobs and supporting them in the jobs that they have.
So the story you're sharing today is about a person who had a mental health event that forced a shift in her career. Can you start at the beginning and tell us about supporting that person to first get a job at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport?
Sure. This individual was very independent. She started out part-time and worked her way to full-time, as well as working her way off Social Security. That's how independent she was, and continued getting increases in her pay over the time. And like I said, she was really independent. She took the city bus everywhere. She and her boyfriend would travel independently. And she hardly ever missed a day, just right on, and then she had her mental health event, which really spiraled and changed her abilities in many ways. She could no longer navigate the MSP airport. There were just too many people, and that caused too much anxiety. So she couldn't return to the MSP airport. And she also could no longer navigate the public transportation system. And that took away so much of her independence, from living in an apartment by herself to having to move to a group home for support. And so, in that process, I would meet with her and help her find a new job. And we applied for jobs and did, resumes and whatnot. And even, we tried doing some bus training, which was unsuccessful. So, it was just kind of a struggle in helping her to find something, from going from being so independent to needing almost total support.
Wow, that it's so interesting. when things like that happen, when there's a change in your health status and you've got this resume that on the surface looks like, amazing experience, but it's no longer relevant because it's not what she's able to do anymore. So you really have to start over and really you have to start over with discovery and understanding where she is now and what her abilities are now, independent of whatever she had done in the past.
Absolutely. Yes, because on the surface, the resume looked beautiful. 6 years, 5, 6 years at this independent placement job at an airline club to, well, where are we at now?
Yeah.
So as you're working with this individual, supporting them through their changes in their health, how did that change how you interacted with the rest of their team? Did their interdisciplinary support team increase? What was that like working with the case manager to perhaps change, the amount of support that was being funded for employment supports, et cetera?
Good question. Of course, she needed much more support. So, we had to ask for more support from the case manager. Her interdisciplinary team did increase because now she had group home staff and a group home manager as well as the support staff. And so the team grew. And it was hard because from being so independent to needing so much support, it was hard to see some of the team accept that because they were so used to her being so independent. So it was really a wake-up call for, say, the guardian who wasn't super involved, who now had to be. And so it was hard to get the guardian to realize that this person does actually need this extra support because she's not who she used to be. And the case manager was pretty supportive. So that was helpful.
I think I really appreciate this experience that you're sharing, Brenda, because for me, it highlights the crucial role that the job coach plays, because sometimes, particularly for folks who perhaps are not getting any like residential support, perhaps for folks who have that are their own guardian or have a guardian that maybe is like legally appointed and checks in, once or twice a year, the job coach is actually the support person that's seeing them the most and kind of seeing these day-to-day changes. And so you're in a very unique position. The job coach is in a very unique position to sort of flag these changes and be like, okay, I think, in my professional opinion, we're going to need to make some adjustments here in working with the person. I'm sure, was there any apprehension on behalf of this person? Like, were they resistive at all to getting increased supports? Did you have to kind of convince them, hey, I think maybe you might benefit from looking at a little bit different living situation? Or were they pretty on board and were like, yeah, I kind of feel some changes in myself and, need that?
It took a while to convince this person that she did need the support because she didn't accept that she had a disability and was like others that had a disability. So going from her independent apartment to a group home with folks that do need support, it did take some convincing and kind of talking into, just think of the friends you could make. You'll live with people. You'll have people help you do this. And it did take some time, but she was very accepting after a while, realizing that she did need the help and support. The difficult part was the group home staff was new to her, and being her job coach for so many years, having to let them know and tell them what she used to be capable of and what the declines are, because of course they didn't understand or know that. So that was hard, but we did get her on board, and now she knows that she has that support and does well with them.
Nice. So I'd like to dig a little deeper into discovery and vocational themes. And, how did you identify where her skill set is now compared to, obviously where it had been before? You're really starting all over again. So I'm kind of curious about the strategies you use to, to figure that out.
Well, being that I did work with her for quite a few years, it was, just conversations. What are your interests? What do you think? She tried to be a home cleaner with a company for the elderly in their homes. And she did all right. However, it wasn't quite the right fit. She couldn't navigate the transportation system. The cleaning tasks weren't quite up to par. So basically it was trial and error. So it took, some help from coworkers. It's important to discuss with coworkers and see, who they're working with and what they have, and working together as a team to be able to, say, so you have this person working at this place. What do you think about this individual giving it a try?
Yeah.
And just kind of utilizing our resources and working together as a team, because we can't do it alone.
Right.
We need each other. So it's teamwork, definitely. But basically trial and error. So we ended up giving her a try at a Marshall store, just kind of straightening shelves, organizing shoes, taking clothing from fitting rooms and re-racking them, stuff like that. And that turned out to be a really good fit for her.
Great. I imagine you need to pivot pretty quickly, because it could get discouraging trying, all these different things and not having success. And, because you're starting from scratch. So how did that go? I think, from that standpoint of, trying to navigate her, her mental health and keep it positive.
Well, always trying to keep her upbeat was important, and lots of verbal praise. While it was frustrating, it was at the same time kind of exciting, because she was trying something new and she was trying something and she was very willing to try. She was very motivated to work. And so it was exciting to at least try something, even though that piece didn't turn out successful. It was just a matter of pumping her up and saying, it's okay. That's not for you. It's okay. We'll find something else. And just helping her to be positive, because she did have those moments where she was really down or skeptical or nervous or anxious, to the point where she kind of had to be talked down a little bit to say, you're okay. Let's just take a deep breath. You got this, as I would follow the bus in my car.
When a person is going through some changes, there's all sorts of factors that come into play, as we had discussed already. And usually an expansion of the support team. There's usually some more folks involved. Did you help this person get connected to resources for their mental health, or how did that work?
Well, as a team, as her interdisciplinary team, we talked about it and worked on it together. However, her guardian and her case manager played a large role in finding somebody in her mental health area.
Got it. Because I just, in my experience, I know sometimes there again that falls to the job coach, and I don't necessarily think it's not like a good or bad thing. It is what it is, right? There's a reason why there's a team. We all have to work together. I think about in certain circumstances with, for example, substance use disorder. There again, that might be something that a job coach picks up on maybe before anybody else on the team does, because that, along with changes in one's mental health, depending on the situation, can pretty quickly start to impact the job. And so then just by default, the job coach is like, okay, well, I'm aware of this. What can we do? And obviously you bring in the team. Work and benefits, something that we hear so much about as a barrier, as a concern to individuals. Was there changes to when this individual really drastically decreased the hours that they worked? How did that impact their benefits, if any, that they were receiving, and what role did you have to play in helping them navigate that?
Yeah, it was a big change in her benefits because she was doing such a great job independently and working her way off of Social Security. And so it was a do-over. It was a total start over. She had to apply for Social Security. And, her MA benefits then needed a bump. And so, doing the paperwork for Social Security and the team. How many hours did she work? How many hours does she work now? What did she make per hour? What does she make now? Just helping her to get all of that in place, which of course involved the team as well. But just making sure that things were aligned to prove that, yeah, she really does need these benefits. And so that played a large factor, and kind of proving that she can no longer work full time at $18 an hour kind of thing. That hours will be cut significantly just due to mental health factors.
It occurs to me how important it is to have sort of a broad base of understanding across multiple service streams. You as a job coach need to understand the DD system, the developmental disability system. You need to understand the mental health system, and how those things work together, because in the abstract, you say, okay, there's this path and then there's this path, but in reality, there's a lot of crossover between those two service streams. Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like and how you were able to work through that?
Well, it was a matter of, what streams of services there was, whether it was the DD or Caddy waiver, the different things like that, and just helping to figure out what the needs will be now, to just make sure that all streams can be in place so this person can get the supports that she needed to be successful in all areas of her life. So it was just a matter of working together and getting the right funding stream.
And, in terms of work and benefits, what kind of training or resources do you leverage to be able to support the folks you're working with to understand how work and benefits go together? you talked about a Social Security subsidy. Heck, even finding out what benefits a person is on. Because I know in my experience, sometimes the folks that we work with, it's like, well, I know I'm getting something, but I'm not entirely sure what it is, SSI, SSDI, etc. So our question is, what resources do you use and what formal training or informal training have you gotten over the years that you think is helpful to your colleagues that you would recommend to someone doing the work?
Yeah. Social Security. Yeah, that is always a thing. Yeah, finding out and knowing what the person receives, whether it's straight SSI or, as you mentioned, Brian, SSDI, which is Social Security Disability versus straight SSI. If someone is on SSDI, there are resources that we can utilize, such as a subsidy, as you mentioned, Brian. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of that. But what a subsidy form does, and Social Security oftentimes sends these out to employers, which is difficult because to our employers, they say, oh yeah, they're just one of our workers at 100%, However, the subsidy form allows for the supports that the person gets, whether it's job coaching, do they take Metro Mobility, do they have attendance issues because of their disability? All of that kind of, for lack of a better word, cuts them some slack in their countable earned income. And there's this handy dandy tool that I've used. It used to actually be the form that we would send to Social Security, but it calculates all of that stuff. Do they need extra help? Do they need extra supervision? How many hours a week of job coaching? As I mentioned, transportation. And it takes it all and it calculates this time and it gives a percentage of what that person would compare to you and I, or 100% worker. Some days I think even we aren't 100% workers, right?
Right.
But I think that using this tool and helping the employer understand what that means, because they see this and they say, oh no, they're fine. They don't take into account the job coaching. They don't take into account the transportation. They don't take into account if this person has disciplinary action because of attendance, that kind of thing. So it helps to do this subsidy and send it off to Social Security. And maybe someone is a 70% worker, comes out at 70%, and it puts them under the substantial gainful allowance for that year. And so I think, just knowing that and helping them to navigate that so that they can work, because it's kind of a double-edged sword. They can't live on the part-time work that they're doing, because they can only work part-time because of their disability, but they can't just live on their Social Security as well. So that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, so one of the things that we like to do with the podcast and put in plugs for training, resources, etc. So Disability Hub MN, a lot of great resources on there. One of the things that I appreciate about that tool that we created here in Minnesota is that it's got different tabs for professionals. So you're like a job coach, et cetera. And it's also got resources tailored towards the individual receiving benefits and also family members. So I think that's pretty cool. I find the videos to be, I appreciate that they're short. So they're a little more digestible for folks that maybe don't have huge pockets of time to spend studying this information. And you mentioned this tool, this subsidy. Where could a professional or whomever find this tool?
You can actually find it on ssa.gov, and it may be called a work questionnaire.
I believe it is. Yeah. And like you said, it is a really useful tool for employers to provide for the opportunity for individuals with disabilities to work additional hours because they have those extra supports in place. And I think, like you said, one of the many roles that an employment specialist or job coach plays is to help an employer understand the purpose of these forms and tools that are out there and available that can make it more of a win-win for everyone, if they understand the purpose of it and how it can be helpful.
Definitely. And explaining it to the employer is really important, because they see it as just a form they have to fill out for an employee. No big deal. But it is a big deal, and it is really important. So I do try to really explain to the employer what it means and what it does.
Yeah. And so just, popping into a search engine, it immediately came up. So SSA, Work Activity Questionnaire. The first thing that comes up is the Social Security Administration. It takes you right to the fillable PDF. And as a reminder to our listeners, helping folks that you're supporting on the job navigate their benefits, that is part of employment services in Minnesota. And so it is billable. The expectation is not that, the job coach is just doing this for free in addition to all the other stuff. This is, billable, your time spent figuring out the information on behalf of the individual. And then, of course, working with the individual to say, hey, this is a tool that we're going to use. I'm going to fill it out for you. But, obviously you need to be aware that this is something that we're doing. So our final question is what we ask all of our guests. And that is, what do you want people in your community to know about employment for people with disabilities?
That is a great question. I want employers to know that someone having a disability, you may not see it, and that's really important, but to get to know and understand what that person needs for supports and asking questions and allowing the people to learn as they go, and just making sure that they accept that this person has a job coach and that we will work together and as a team, because that's how we can make this person successful. And just sharing when that person is having a bad day or why they're having a bad day, if it's okay to share that. And just helping them to be successful and boosting them up, and just knowing that they're people too, and they're trying to live their best life too. And so they just need some extra support to do that.
Well said. Thank you, Brenda, for joining us today and for sharing some of your experiences doing the work. Thank you, listeners, for tuning into this episode. We hope you join us next time to hear another compelling story of one person finding one job in the community. Thank you for joining us for the Job Matchmakers podcast, funded by the Minnesota Department of Human Services. This podcast is a partnership between the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration and UMass Boston's Institute for Community Inclusion. For more information on the Minnesota Transformation Initiative, visit our website, linked in the show notes. We're glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.